Welcome, everybody. We'll give folks another couple minutes to join, and then we'll get started. For those who've just joined, we're going to wait another minute or two, and then we'll jump right in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I see we are at 67 participants. For those who have children in the age range of, I don't know, kindergarten to 25, you'll recognize that 6-7 has some no meaning, but meaning to them, where they just say these numbers together. It is actually going to be my Halloween costume. I'm going as 6-7 for Halloween, mostly because it has the highest likelihood of embarrassing my own children. And I've got a real good hand for it, 6-7. So, anyways, happy Halloween, everyone. We can I just want to welcome you all to our October stakeholder meeting for the Pathways Initiative. Happy to have you all here. We've got some updates for everyone today, and look forward to finishing out the year strong. Wanted to start today by kind of reminding everyone of the major components of our final proposal from step 2. It's sort of a grounding for all of the work that we have ahead of us, and the updates that we're going to be providing. One of the things, I think, again, I will say it probably for the 57th time for this group, is one of the most exciting things about the passage of AB 825 in California was that it fully enables us to implement that final proposal without any exceptions. So we thought it was worth taking a few minutes just to talk through what that actually means as a reminder, since it's been about a year since we put that out. Just a quick brief update on funding. We'll talk about the nominating committee representative responsibilities and expectations, lay out the timeline over the next, between now and the end of the year, for getting the corporate documents finalized, and then talk a little bit about our work streams and the work that we are planning to do for the next couple of years. So with that, let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about, just as a reminder, some of the components of the regional organization that we contained in that final proposal. If you have not revisited the final proposal in some time, I do recommend going back and at least reading the executive summary and the recommendations just to refresh your memory about what we said we were going to do. Our plan at this point is we are developing our work plan for those various issues to get this RO off the ground, is to really adhere as closely as we can to what we put in that final proposal. Obviously, as we dig into some of the details, we will need to make adjustments as necessary to reflect reality, and make sure that we are able to do the functions that we put down on paper and that we are negotiating with the CAISO over the course of the next couple of years. And as we have along the way, we will continue to bring any recommendations and changes through the formation committee and the launch committee and ultimately up to stakeholders so that we maintain that transparency that has been so critical to the process thus far. So just as a reminder, on the tariff, we proposed to give the new regional organization sole 205 filing rights over the energy markets. And that is, when you think about the CAISO tariff, that is the provisions that relate to the EIM and EDAM, and recognizing that there are still going to be provisions that relate to CAISO functions and that relate to the RO functions, making sure that we have a very clear process for working through some of those areas of joint authority, so that we have very clear sole authority for the RO over those energy markets. The RO will have its own independent staff. We are going to be starting small at the beginning, for a handful of reasons. One, we need to be able to keep costs down at the beginning. The RO is going to be tariff funded, and it's going to take some time to build up that funding. And to really make sure that we can do this is to get the RO off the ground and independently running as soon as possible. We need to start small and have a plan for growth. And so that's the way we have designed the RO, and that is what we're working towards. Any of the functions that the RO is going to need to have that it doesn't have from day one will be in a contract with the CAISO to ensure, again, that there is independent delivery of those services as needed. The RO is going to have input into some of the staff members at the CAISO that will be working on the market operations, so that relate very closely to the functions that the RO will be overseeing. We're going to have a full independent stakeholder process, and I think this is something that is going to continue to be a really important area for us to receive input as we're developing what this actually looks like on the ground. But the goal is for stakeholder process that for any initiatives that fall within the RO's authority, that they will be RO driven, and that the RO will have the ability to manage those stakeholder processes and take those decisions up to the board without any additional extra influence from any other organizations. So having that independence in that stakeholder process is going to be really important. We're maintaining the body of state regulators. We're creating a new independent consumer advocate organization, and the state consumer advocate offices are starting work on that already. We're going to have an office of public participation within the RO that is really going to help with a lot of the education and helping define access to the RO's processes and helping stakeholders and the public know how and when to engage. And then we're going to have this public policy committee of the RO board. And this is an independent, this is a committee of RO board members that is going to be tasked with engaging with local, state, and federal agencies anytime there is a stakeholder initiative or a proposed change to the tariff. at the beginning of the process to kind of get a feel at the beginning of whether or not there is the potential for any conflict with local, state, or federal policies, to get that input from the beginning that can then get worked through the stakeholder process, and then to touch base again with those folks before there is a final decision made by the board, and making sure that the board has all of that input and information before it makes a final decision. So ensuring that we have an actual structure and function to achieve one of the primary foundational goals of this whole proposal, which was to ensure that each state had continued to maintain its own ability to set and enforce its own energy policies. That has been an important and foundational piece of this from the beginning, really for every single state and state actor that has been engaged in this. So making sure we have that structure in place to achieve that goal. And then organizationally, we'll have our independent about that and seating that initial board next summer. The RO will have the ultimate authority over any market-related business practice manuals. It's going to be fully separate. And then there's going to be evaluations built in to this contract between the RO and the CAISO to ensure that the performance of the contract, the independence of the functions, continues to meet the standard that we need it to. And then ultimately, and maybe most importantly, the RO is going to need to be able to add additional market services that are voluntary for any Western stakeholders who want them. And so being able to go from just overseeing the EIM and EDAM to adding additional services as Western stakeholders demand them is a really critical function. This is not just independent governance over these energy markets. It is independent governance over all of the functions and offerings that go beyond that, which obviously will have different priorities and different ideas for different entities. But really it is that evolution in the future that was the real driver behind needing to take this step from the get-go. So just wanted to take a moment and remind everyone of these components of that final proposal, and take the opportunity to just remind everyone that this is what we're working towards, and continuing to go back and reference that final proposal and the various components that were included in there. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jim Shetler to provide a quick update on our approach to funding.
Thanks, Kathleen. Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Jim Shetler, serve as the General Manager for the Balancing Authority in Northern California, and I'm a POU rep to the Launch Committee and the Formation Committee. Want to give a quick update on where we're at with budget and funding for this next phase of the effort. We're in the process of refining the budget, not only to look at the next 2 years, 26 and 27 for implementation, but also to do an initial budget for the first year of operations in 28. That $7 to $8 million estimate is for 26 and 27. And we're, like I said, we're in the process of refining, making sure we've covered the necessary costs. And looking at funding for that, we currently are looking at 3 main tranches of funding. One would be stakeholder contributions, similar to what we did in the early phases of the effort. And if you haven't already, your sector reps will be reaching out to you looking for donations in that arena. The second is grants. We've talked about this before. We did have a federal grant that we had submitted and had initial approval for late last year. That has since been on hold, and is rather doubtful that we will get that federal grant going forward. We are starting to outreach to other entities to look at private sector entities who may be willing to provide grant funds for this effort, and have had some initial conversations around that. And then the third area is debt financing. And not too dissimilar to what some of you may remember from the original startup of the California ISO and other entities, is taking a loan out to cover the startup costs with the intent that the startup costs would be repaid through the future revenues of the organization down the road. We're in the early stages of having dialogue about how that debt financing might be structured, who might we be borrowing from, what we would need to do as far as having collateral in place to allow that to happen. So that is early stages of that, though likely probably where we would get most of the money we would need for moving forward with this. And then, of course, we will have to balance scope versus budget as we move forward. Since I have another commitment at 11, I thought maybe if you're okay, Kathleen, I'd take any questions anybody might have right now since I won't be on later.
Absolutely.
So open up for any questions.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Scott. We might have to figure out how to unmute you, so hang on 1 second. If that's there you go. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, all right, great. Thanks. Jim, just for the benefit of everybody on the call, could we do have some money on hand, and we do plan to sort of get through the rest of this year, and as well as the fundraising that some of us are going to be doing in our sectors to get us through to the point when we can do the sort of larger effort of grants or debt financing and stuff like that. Can you sort of give us a little timeline out of that, or are you not prepared to do that?
Scott, you know I'm always prepared.
Yes, you are.
Yes. So the good news is we have sufficient funding from earlier contributions to get us through the end of this year. And we anticipate right now we will be somewhere in the $120,000-$130,000 balance come the first of the year. So it will be important for us to get some seed money going for next year through contributions. I'm in the process of reaching out to the utilities and the EDAM entities on that and starting that. Our intent would be to, through contributions, allow us to move forward with the selection process and so forth in the early part of next year while we finalize the grant and debt financing. And what the intent would be to have those resolved by the middle of next year.
Thanks, Jim. Good question, Scott. Scott, you have another question? Sarah, I think we have to unmute Scott again.
Oh,
there we go. Good. Sorry, I was trying.
I just wanted to encourage everybody in the independent sector that people will be coming at you to give generously. We don't have any sappy commercials to do for this sort of thing, but we're going to be doing this so that we can get the RO ready to begin the process and then move on to the debt financing because we've got a lot of stuff to do.
Thanks, Scott. I agree. Give early, give often. But we are having some good conversations with folks on the other two categories as well. So we will be making, so I think it is definitely going to look like a combination of those three in pretty healthy percentages as we get into next year. So thanks, Jim. Thank you, Scott. Any other questions on funding at this point? We'll continue to keep you all updated as we nail down more concrete plans. All right, next slide, please. So we'll talk a little bit about the board selection process. We've shared some of these documents with stakeholders, so just wanted to, I think, do a quick recap and talk through these and see if anybody had any questions. Just on a reminder on the timing, we have actually issued an RFP for an executive search firm. We did that earlier this week. We've got about a 3-week turnaround window for proposals. But we are looking at November 14th for each of the 9 sectors to have their nominating committee representative selected. The board selection process will begin in January, so the nominating committee will begin to really meet in earnest at the beginning of next year. And the goal is to find 5 board members to be seated by in or around July of 2026. Those we will ultimately, as a reminder, we've got a goal of having 7 board members for the sort of long-term operation of the RO, but just to kick things off, we're starting with 5. Next slide, please. In case you are wondering which sector you belong to, or you are wondering what the process is, has your sector started having conversations? These are the folks to reach out to for more information for each of those 9 sectors. So if you don't know what who is raising their hand to become a nominating committee representative, please reach out to these folks and get more information. If for some reason you don't know where you land, because these are a little bit different from the sectors that the Regional Issues Forum has maintained for the last while, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help connect you to the right people and get you in the right places. Next slide, please. As a quick overview, the expectations and responsibilities of a nominating committee representative. These are the people that are going to be representing their sectors in the evaluation of candidates to sit on the board. You're going to have to receive feedback from your sector, provide that back to the nominating committee, and really have a lot of conversations about the qualifications, about any conflicts, experience, those kinds of things, so that we can help identify the most qualified candidates to sit in that initial board, recognizing that it's going to be a very active board. We've got a lot of work to do ahead of us to get the RO off the ground. The nominating committee is ultimately going to act on consensus, and then there will be some confidentiality constructs even within the sector to ensure that we are protecting confidential personnel information, but also fostering candid conversations with the sector about these candidates as well. So the nominating committee is going to get together. They will collectively develop some guidelines for their own work early on in their process. And we're hoping that an executive search firm is going to really help facilitate the work, help facilitate finding qualified candidates, the interview process, and all the various aspects of finding the right 5 people. Next slide, please. Recognizing that there is going to be a simultaneous process happening with the CAISO for the WAM governing body, and that we still have the launch committee operational. We wanted to, there were some potential conflicts here that we wanted to make sure we mapped out for folks so that you can understand whether or not you want to be a nominating committee representative and what that means for your ability to do to serve in other functions as well. So if you are a nominating committee representative on behalf of, I will use my own sector, the large commercial industrial, actually I'm not going to use my own sector because we don't have a sector, an individual sector in the governing body process. But for one of those sectors that is in the governing body process, if you serve on that nominating committee, you will not be able to serve as the nominating committee representative for the RO board process. We want to make sure that we're able, again, to protect some of the confidentiality and manage the processes independently, since they are looking at very different, at different roles. And so right there, if you serve on one, you can't serve on the other. Having said that, it is a very individual thing. So if you've got someone else from your organization, that person can serve on the other nominating committee process. So you could have two people from the same organization serving on these separate nominating committees. The other potential conflict in here is serving on the launch committee. And it's not necessarily that it is a conflict, but because the launch committee is going to take an initial vote on the slate of candidates that are recommended by the nominating committee, we don't want there to be a double vote. So if you serve on the nominating committee, you are on the launch committee, you are not going to be able to vote when the launch committee takes that on. Instead, an alternate would be able to take that vote for a sector. So for example, and I really use my sector this time, for the large C&I customer sector, if I were the nominating committee representative, since I am also on the launch committee, I would not be able to vote, but Priya from SEBA, who is the alternate on the launch committee, would instead vote in that on the launch when the launch committee conducts that vote. So there will still be a vote happening. I will pause. TJ, I see you have.
Yes, hi. On the previous slide, or later on in slides, is there gonna kind of be an update in the timeline for the standing up of the RO? Is there gonna be any information beyond, what am I noticing, July of 2026?
I can talk through a little bit of that. We've got we don't have a ton of the details. A lot of that is going to depend on how quickly we get some of the work through the work streams done. But the goal is at this point, we'll have an independent board seated in July of 2026. And then the work we'll be working at that point to get the tariff changes developed and finalized and filed at FERC, that are required to move the authority from the CAISO over to the new RO, for EIM and EDAM. We'll be working on the contract between the CAISO and the RO, which will also be something that will get filed at FERC. And so those, sort of those two foundational pieces, we're going to be working on the stakeholder process. I'll walk through some of these work streams still a little later in the presentation. But the goal at this point is for that tariff authority, hopefully, to have FERC approval and to be fully in place and have the RO really truly go live with its authority at the beginning of 2028. So that has been our kind of timeline thus far.
Okay, thank you. And just one follow-up. You said there's two steps. There's to get the tariff changes to remove the responsibilities from the CAISO to the RO board, and then there was contracts for what?
So there's going to have to be a service agreement between the RO and the CAISO, because the CAISO is going to continue to operate the markets. And then we'll also be providing some additional services. So there will be a contract between those two entities to kind of lay out all those functions and the relationship between them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. And Randy, I thought I saw your hand. Did you want to?
Yeah, I thought my hand was still up, but I guess it's down. So I don't have a personal concern with the eligibility. My only question was, there's also a process initiating right now for the CAISO governing body nominating committee that isn't listed as one of your criteria that, would impact your eligibility. And what's the thought there?
Sorry, Randy, ask that question again. I'm not sure.
All right. So the CAISO governing body, CAISO governing body has just kicked off a process with their nominating committee for the CAISO board. Would that be considered a concern as to representative eligibility for the RO nominating committee?
I don't know why I didn't realize that was happening.
So that was the only one not listed that I'm aware of.
Well, because the board members for the CAISO are appointed by the governor. So it's a,
Yeah, the nominating committee basically would select and recommend to the governor, and then obviously to the full Senate if the governor agrees to be representatives. So yeah, it's a little different, but it's still, I didn't know if it would create a potential conflict.
Randy, it's a good question and something we will look into and provide an update. Thanks for flagging that.
Sure.
Yeah, it's because it's a slightly different process. I hadn't really thought about that, but it's a good flag. All right. Any other questions about the board selection process that we're going through here? All right. Then let's go to the next slide. So wanted to provide a quick update on the timeline for our corporate documents. The goal is still to incorporate the RO in January of 2026. And so we will be filing at that point our bylaws, our articles of incorporation, the IRS Form 1023, which includes a business plan and a 3-year budget, as well as a handful of policies. We have put out the bylaws in particular for stakeholder input. The rest of these documents contain sort of summaries of things that we have already talked through with stakeholders and gotten input into. So there's no new information, there's no new structures or anything like that. But we will be, so the launch committee is in the process of reviewing all of these things. We will share them all with the public and we'll walk through them all at our December 12th meeting, when the launch committee will vote on that final package to adopt them and be ready to file them with the IRS in January. Just as a note of procedure, only our voting members of the launch committee are going to vote on that. So our non-voting members, which include our state representatives and our WAPA representative, will not be voting on the bylaws, nor will the alternates. We will, unless we're missing a launch committee member. So we will have that full package available for stakeholders leading up to that December 12th meeting. Next slide, please. And finally, just as we're starting to think about how we're actually going to get all of this work done, we are going to be going back to the way we developed most of our materials for the final proposal, where we had some topical work groups take on various issues. And so as we have started to map out what those primary issues look like, we're going to be developing work groups that are going to be working on work streams, including corporate documents. That one's almost done. The board selection process. This will be a group that can help support the board selection process over the course of the next 8 months or so. We've got a funding work group working on the categories that Jim mentioned earlier. We'll have a work group working on developing the tariff modifications, working with the CAISO to figure out what those changes will need to look like. We'll have a work group that starts working probably later next year on the components of the RO CAISO agreement. We've got the consumer advocate offices working on the development of the actual new independent consumer advocate office. As a reminder, that is going to be a separate 501c3 organization. So the construct of that is being developed by the state consumer advocate offices. It will have tariff funding, so that will be included in those tariff modifications. We've got a group working on the scope of work for the Office of Public Participation. And then we'll have a group working on the stakeholder process, which really contains kind of a couple of components, including how we stakeholder all of the work that needs to happen between now and when the RO goes live in January 2028. as well as what the RO's stakeholder process looks like starting in January of 2028, and what that relationship with the CAISO is. And then making sure that we are working very closely with the RIF, the Regional Issues Forum, along the way, to as they are working on their own enhancements to their process. For those who were able to join the RIF meeting earlier this week, they presented a proposal for this as well. We're going to be working very closely with the RIF and the CAISO as those evolutions occur over the course of the next couple of years, and we transition into the Stakeholder Representative Committee and the full stakeholder process for the new RO. So with that, we can go to the next slide. Opportunities for engagement. Our next meeting is going to be on December 12th. Again, all of our materials are posted on the WEEB landing page. I will pause and see if anybody has any questions about any of the material that we've covered today. All right. Thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful and safe Halloween. And we look forward to seeing you again in about 6 weeks. Thanks, everyone.